How's it going, guys? I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this ever before, but I want to preface this video by saying that I am legitimately a sleep tech junkie, mostly because my sleep usually sucks. So I've always gone to great lengths to improve it over the years, literally to the point of like putting magnetic strips to seal my blackout curtains against the window frame, and even adding black weather stripping to my door frame to prevent every possible photon of light from bouncing into the room. So I was definitely interested when I heard about a smart mattress called the 8 Sleep Pod Pro that allowed you to literally water cool or heat your bed. So I was debating whether or not to buy it because it ain't cheap. The company does offer something you can use with your existing mattress though, instead of buying the whole mattress. I'll have to go over that later though. Anyway, as luck would have it, the company actually ended up reaching out to me and offered to send me one of the mattresses, so obviously I accepted since I was considering it anyway. Now, I don't want to just brush past that. I want to be super clear about the disclosures for the video, which I'll go over right here. So yes, 8 Sleep, the company, did provide me with the mattress and everything for free to make a video about. Specifically, it's the Pod Pro Max model. I didn't get any additional payment besides the product though. They didn't tell me what to say or give me any talking points. I can say whatever I want. Otherwise, I wouldn't even call it a review, but rather maybe a spotlight or something. So as always, for any review, it's all going to be my genuine thoughts. Finally, they did provide me with an affiliate link in the description. You can use that if you found the review helpful and want to support the channel. I'll get a commission if you use it. So again, just want to be upfront about it because it is a pretty higher ticket item. So with all that being said, you can take the video with as many grains of salt as you want, but I did put a lot of thought into making this one, and I went into a lot of detail, so I'll put the timestamps in the description, probably put the chapter names up here too if you want to go to specific parts. All right, so starting off, what even is this mattress and what makes it smart? Well, the real main big feature is the ability to control the temperature of the mattress throughout the night, whether colder or warmer, but probably cooler in most cases. Each half side of the mattress can individually set different temperatures for 4 different parts of the night, which I'll definitely be getting into more detail later. Right off the bat though, I do want to point out that you do not have to buy the entire mattress. There's basically 2 parts, the cover with all the tech and cooling, and the mattress, and they do sell the so-called Pod Pro cover by itself, so you can get the cooling and statistics tracking tech with your existing bed. If you do go for one of the mattress models, there are a few options, namely just the Pod Pro, and the Pod Pro Max, which is what I have here, the Max. I'll go into more detail about the mattress portion and the differences in the models near the end of the video, but the real bulk of the review is all about the smart functions. In addition to the heating and cooling, the mattress also has a bunch of sensors built in, and you can see all the statistics using the app, which is also how you control the settings and everything. It can sense movement, like when you get into bed, toss and turn during the night, and get out of bed, even when you actually fall asleep. So for example, while you can set a typical bedtime so it can prepare the temperature ahead of time, it uses the time you actually get into bed and fall asleep to determine when it goes through the different temperature stages for the rest of the night. This is big because it means things won't get messed up if you go to bed later sometimes. It also means you don't have to mess with the app every night for it to turn on and work. It's automatic. There are plenty more tracking features I'll mention now, but go into more detail later, like statistics on the actual amount of time you slept based on the time you fell asleep, which it can sense, as well as different sleep stages. The sensors are so sensitive that it even tracks your heart rate variability on the order of milliseconds, and respiratory rate. Then it gives you a sleep score for the night based on certain factors, and again, I'll be going a lot more into detail about that stuff and plenty of other features. Now, you might be wondering, why would you actually want this? Well, in my case, I've always had trouble with the temperature in my room. I pretty much live in a desert, so it's already tough to keep my place cool in general. Call me crazy, but I actually like the temperature really warm during the day at like 78, but I like to sleep much colder at night, ideally like 70, so it has to cool down a lot. The bigger problem, and I'm sure many can relate, is my bedroom is far from the air conditioner, so it gets the least airflow. Let me show you. So I have these temperature monitors, and you can see if I start the air conditioning at 11 p.m., which is about an hour before I intend to fall asleep, even running continuously, the room doesn't get down to 70 until around 4 a.m. So literally only half the night is at a decently cool temperature. So if your situation is anything like mine, this could very well be the solution, and it definitely does the job, as I'll explain later. Before getting into the full feature set, let me show you through the setup process. Everything came in 2 shipments, one for the mattress and one with the cover and the unit that does the actual cooling called the hub. You take out the mattress and unroll it from the plastic, which is probably easier with 2 people, but I had no trouble doing it myself. It's all vacuum packed, so I carefully cut the plastic to help it expand, which it did right away. You just have to make sure the orientation is correct. The direction does matter. Then you put on the cover, which has the active grid for cooling plus all the other tech. This just zips onto the mattress. You can actually see the water cord hanging out the end, and then it attaches to the hub, which does all the cooling and pumping. The cord is pretty long and should reach wherever you want. I was able to run it under my nightstand. It's just not super flexible when it comes to sharp turns, but that's also to help prevent kinks. Looking at the cord, there's 4 tubes. Each side of the bed has its own intake and outtake. That's how they can be controlled individually. Then it plugs into the back of the hub with a little notch that ensures it goes on the right way, along with a little USB plug for the sensors, and finally you just plug in the power cord. Looking at the hub, it basically looks like a computer case. There's not much to see here, but it does all the cooling and heating inside, then pumps it through the active grid, it's called. At the top you have a water tank, which we'll see in a second, and on the bottom there's an indicator light that shows the different colors to indicate different stuff. The only 2 buttons are on the back, the bigger one for resetting the Wi-Fi connection, and the smaller one is for doing a factory reset, but I'm not sure if they're used for anything else. There's air intake on the bottom and exhaust out the back, and wait a minute, I recognize that fan. Yep, it's a Noctua, funny enough. If you've ever built a PC, you probably know about these. They're ugly, but are known to be especially quiet, but still with great performance, so at least you know they use good components. Continuing the setup, once the hub is plugged in, it just turns itself on and you follow the steps through the app to pair it with your Wi-Fi network. Then it has to go through the process of priming, where basically you fill the tank a couple of times and it runs the pump for a while to remove air bubbles from the system. You definitely need to use distilled water, and it also says you need to add some hydrogen peroxide. This is all to ensure that all the internals stay clean. You'll have to occasionally refill more water, I guess because some can evaporate out over time. Apparently you only have to do this every 2 to 3 months or so, and the app will remind you about when it's necessary anyway. It also comes with a draining tool, but according to a help article, that's basically just if you're moving or something and need to get the water out of the hub and cover. For regular maintenance, it's just adding water to refill. Anyway, after about an hour and a half, the priming process will be finished, and you can still use the heating and cooling function in the meantime. It just might be a bit louder and have less thermal performance. Then for the final step is to set some initial settings, like it will ask you about how you generally prefer to feel in terms of temperature when going to bed, and it will set the first night based on that. To see the bed and stuff actually working, I broke out my thermal camera to take a look, and it's pretty interesting. Here you can immediately see how the active grid thing is laid out. It's literally a grid. For this, I had set the mattress to some cold setting, and it had only been on for a couple of minutes. It shows the cold parts of the grid around 75 degrees Fahrenheit. You can see how the grid goes and connects to the tubing at the head, and that the grid doesn't actually extend all the way to the edges, I guess since that's where your pillow is. When lying down on it, you don't really even feel the grid tubes or anything, besides the temperature from them, obviously. Also, it looks like the spaces between the grid lines are slightly colder than the rest of the mattress too, so when lying down, it feels pretty uniform. One cool thing is if you look at the hose, you can actually see that one side is colder than the other, which is to be expected, but neat to see. Also, you might not realize that even putting your hand on the mattress just for a couple seconds, it transfers some of the heat there, but right away you can see the parts directly above the grid get cooled down, and the rest follows. I decided to do a bigger test with the thermal camera though, in order to see how fast it can cool down bigger areas. So I pre-cooled one side of the mattress down to a setting of -5. I'll explain the numbers later, but basically it goes from -10 to +10. Then I laid down right in the middle, arms sticking out for more coverage, for a total of about 3 minutes. Right as I got up, the thermal camera recalibrated, which it does automatically, but the timing here is actually good because it means it should be accurate from the get-go here. There are 3 measurement points. The left point is where the left arm was on the cooling side. The middle point is basically center mass, but also just on the edge of the cooling grid. And the right point was on the right arm. And this is just with a mattress protector and fitted sheet on the bed, so no comforter or anything. The cooled points right from the beginning start out at a slightly lower temperature since they've been pulling away heat the whole time. It's only a few degrees, but that doesn't tell the whole story because as I was laying down, the cooled side felt legitimately cold. I graphed the data in Excel by writing down the temperature points for every 5 seconds after getting up. The first 5 seconds, there's no data because the camera was recalibrating. The blue bar region is approximately room temperature, which was around 82 degrees, and yes, the room was legitimately that hot with all the lights and stuff having been on. Notice how the cooled side gets down to room temperature in under 20 seconds, while the normal side takes over a minute to stabilize around there, and the cooled side continues going down well below room temperature. At around 90 seconds, the normal side seems to have stabilized, then the camera decided to recalibrate again, so the data after that becomes a bit confusing, but by then it looks like all the residual heat from me laying down is basically gone anyway. I continued the graph after the recalibration just to see. The camera had adjusted all the temperatures up by 0.6 degrees, so I added a dotted line to show the remaining data as if it didn't do that. So the dotted lines aren't technically correct, but might make it easier to see the trend. Either way, the right side stopped at around room temperature, obviously, and on the left side, the camera shows some of the coldest parts at around the low 70s. And again, it felt way colder than what 70-degree air temperature feels like, I guess because the water is more thermally conductive. Anyway, pretty cool to see it in action. All right, so now let's go over a bunch of stuff in the app. First, I'll say the app really does feel very polished and well made, which I mean you'd expect for such an expensive product, but you never know these days. And the layout is that at the bottom there are 4 sections, or menus I guess I'll call them. Far left is the home menu where basically all the controls are, so there's a lot to go over here. You can toggle between the home and temp dial tabs at the top, which are still within the overall home menu. The home tab shows you the most recent night stats and sleep score, which I'd say is generally accurate. That night I had caffeine way too late and couldn't fall asleep and kept waking up, so the score was pretty bad. And here it'll also show you some tips, like it might suggest a temperature profile to try and then probably ask you how it was to learn. At the bottom of the overall home menu, whether you're in the home or temp dial tab, you can tap that to bring up the temperature settings the pod will use for different parts of the night. You can set it from -10 to +10, but again, I'll go over the numbers in a minute. The first part is bedtime, which is what the temperature will be when you get into bed, which the mattress prepares beginning 1 hour before the time you choose here. Next, let me skip to the wake up tab. This one is actually optional. If it's enabled, the mattress will move towards this set temperature starting 1 hour before your set wake up time. Also, at the exact wake up time, you can set it to vibrate in pulses around your chest area to wake you up, which they call gentle rise, with the idea being it's less likely to wake up your partner next to you as opposed to an alarm clock. Or you can disable the wake up temperature change and only have it vibrate. You can set the intensity from 1 to 10, where it will ramp up over time, and it seemed to be at least around 5 minutes to max out. Also, I could be wrong about this, but it seemed like there wasn't a huge difference in strength of the initial pulses, no matter whether it was set to 1 or 10. So rather, I think the setting changes the max strength it ramps up to. So if that's the case, I think you may as well just max it out at 10, since it only goes that strong if you don't wake up for a while anyway. Oh, and you can add multiple alarms even for the same day, or you can have them repeat on different days. Now let's go back to the middle 2 stages, which are for deep and REM sleep, and correspond to the first and second halves of the night respectively. It suggests a cooler temperature for deep sleep, and for REM sleep, something closer to neutral. For these, like I said, the mattress will use the biometric sensors to detect when you actually fall asleep before moving from the bedtime stage to the deep stage. So it's not just a dumb timer based on the bedtime you set. Now, if you're an intellectual like me, you might be questioning some of this, because you might know that the brain actually alternates through all phases of sleep in around 90-minute cycles throughout the night. So you might be asking how you can just divide the night into 2 halves. Well, like it says in the app, and yes, I did look this up to verify it myself and make sure it wasn't just marketing speak, it turns out around the first half of the night, it is indeed mostly deep sleep, and only short periods of REM sleep per cycle, like maybe a few minutes. And as the night goes on, periods of REM sleep get progressively longer per cycle, so in the second half it is indeed mostly REM sleep with less deep sleep. And if I skip ahead for a second to the statistics page where it shows sleep stages for each night, this night was a perfect example of this. At first, there are very short REM phases, with each being longer than the last as deeper phases get shorter. Not every night will look this textbook, but should still follow the general trend. One more thing in here is the optional autopilot mode, where for the first week or so, it will learn your temperature preferences by asking how each night went, and presumably as you'll be trying out different temperatures early on. I just have it set to manually at the moment because I think I found settings I find to be good after some trial and error. Finally, we can take a look at the temp dial tab, which lets you directly turn on and control the mattress right now. So you can use it anytime, like for a nap or something, not just at the scheduled time. Now, as you've seen, you don't actually set an exact temperature in degrees or Celsius, but rather on a scale from -10 to +10, with 0 being neutral, -10 being extremely cold, it says, and +10 being extremely hot. And when it says extremely, they actually mean it. The website says it has a max range from 55 degrees Fahrenheit on the cold side up to 110 degrees, depending on the ambient conditions, I believe. I'm personally pretty sensitive to the cold, but even -1 feels cool, and -2 feels borderline cold. And keep in mind, this is probably because even at neutral 0 at room temperature, the water is still flowing, so it's still going to pull away a bunch of extra heat because your body temperature is quite a bit higher than room temp. So a little bit of cooling goes a long way. Still neat that it lets you go to super extremes if you want though. Alright, now let's move on to the second menu section of the app called Sleep Reports, which is also important. For any given day, it will show you an overall sleep fitness score based on the rest of the stats below. First, there's time slept, which is not necessarily just the time between falling asleep and waking up, but it also considers if you had awakenings or got out of bed. Then there's wake up consistency, time to fall asleep, and time out of bed during the night, all of which are pretty self-explanatory. Each stat also shows you an average of the past 7 days, I believe, along with a goal range, which appears to determine the score for that stat and whether you were within the range or not. I'm not sure exactly how the final score is calculated, but it's not just a basic average of the 4 scores. There is some weighting going on. The timeline box shows when you got into bed, actually fell asleep, woke up, and then got out of bed. And then it shows different sleep stages it determined you were in and when. What I really like about this is the sensors they use are going to be a lot more sophisticated than something like one of those phone apps that claim to track sleep cycles but never seem to work, at least for me. Since the mattress is sensitive enough to detect respiratory rate, heart rate, as well as movement, I believe it uses several factors to determine stages and when you fall asleep. It's not just purely if you're moving or not. But there are separate boxes where you can see how much you tossed and turned, as well as your heart rate through the night. Overall, I found these sleep statistics themselves to be pretty accurate in a general sense, just based on how I felt after waking up at least. For example, one night I woke up feeling like I had slept better than usual, and sure enough, it showed nearly a full 8 hours of sleep time and almost no awakenings, and gave 100%. That's the one I showed you before with the very clear sleep cycles with increasing REM phases. This Wednesday night, like I said, I had some caffeine way too late and couldn't fall asleep, so I got garbage sleep of only 5 hours, and it shows a score of 36%. Seemed about right. There's also some tabs for a weekly view of the stats for each recent day, plus month and year tabs for showing longer term averages. Beyond being just a curiosity, I think these statistics are probably most useful if you're willing to put in a little bit of effort and try to keep track of what you're doing during the day that might be affecting your sleep, and then checking the statistics to see if there's a correlation. Now, moving on, the third section in the app is Health Report, which has a few other stats. There's heart rate variability, which is the average difference in time between each heartbeat. There's sleeping heart rate, which we also saw in the previous tab, but it shows a daily average here. And sleeping respiratory rate shows you how many times per minute you breathe while asleep. You can tap into any of these to see nightly averages across different time frames, and I assume these are in a different tab because they're not so much related to each night's sleep, but more so an average for you as an individual, and they'll be different for everybody. So they mostly just depend on if they happen to go outside your typical range, it might tell you, and each one has a little info button which tells you what it might mean if that happens. The final section is called Sleep Tools. It has stuff like guided meditations and some yoga and exercise videos you can follow in the morning or evening. There's a guided breathing exercise thing where you set how long you want to do it and then follow along. Also, there's a section for nature sounds like rain, rivers, and stuff that you could probably stream to a speaker or something, and it has a built-in timer. Some other features worth mentioning are that the Pod Pro does integrate with some other services with an API. It actually supports If This Then That, a website that integrates a ton of services, and you can use any of them to trigger basically any other service. So you can have it turn on your Philips Hue lights when the smart alarm goes off, is an example they have. There's also an Alexa skill, and if you have an iPhone, it integrates with Apple Health. Okay, so having talked about the technology side of everything, I can't forget the actual mattress. Now, there are several models, all of them memory foam, but constructed with different layers of materials. First is the Pod, which seems to be the basic model, and is actually notable because it seems to be the only one that doesn't have as many advanced tracking sensors like the other models. On the other hand, it's my understanding that all the other Pro models, from just the Pod Pro cover to the Pod Pro and Pro Max mattresses, all those have the same advanced tracking sensors and tech. So in my opinion, if you're gonna drop that kind of cash on a smart mattress, you may as well get one of the Pro models. As for the Pod Pro and Pod Pro Max, both are 12-inch mattresses, but the Max has different layers. Here's what each one is made of specifically. One difference is the Pro has a supportive air technology layer, which the Max seems to replace with a Tranquility transition foam layer, and also the Max has a so-called Max Chill layer, which supposedly dissipates heat better. Does that make the Max Pro worth the extra cost over the Pro? I have no clue. You'll just have to decide that for yourself, especially considering I can't exactly compare the two in person. What I will say is that at least with the Pod Pro Max, and I assume the others based on what I've read, it's a pretty firm mattress, definitely more so than I expected. It's not rock solid or anything, and maybe I'm just used to having the pillow topper on my old one. Though I'm also not exactly a heavy person, so that probably has something to do with it. And I mean, it is memory foam, so it still supports and contours to you, but just be aware if you prefer super soft pillowy mattresses, I personally think you'd be better off just getting the cover for your own mattress. So now my overall thoughts on the 8 Sleep Pod Pro Max. I'm definitely happy with it and really have nothing bad to say about it. It might sound like I'm shilling, but I'm really not. The only downside really is the price, which probably puts it out of many people's range. That's not to say it's overpriced, it's just one of those things that aren't cheap. Now, is it some magical mattress that can guarantee you perfect sleep? Obviously not. There are a lot of factors for sleep quality. I definitely sometimes still have bad nights of sleep for any number of reasons. But temperature used to be a major one for sure, and that I was unable to solve until now. If you know that you have frequent problems feeling comfortable temperature-wise at night, or even just think that it would be really nice to get the temperature absolutely perfect, you'll probably get a lot more benefit from this. The tracking stuff is definitely a nice addition too, and from a purely practical standpoint, might be useful to draw correlations with behavior during the day that might be affecting your sleep. For example, what you're eating, or for days you exercise versus days you don't, that sort of thing. So yeah, overall, definitely happy with it. And hopefully this video gave you a pretty detailed look at how everything works. Again, if you want, there's a link in the description where you can check it out, and it'll support the channel. So let me know what you think down in the comments, and if you want to keep watching, the next video I recommend is a video I made recently about a feature in most email programs that lets you get a verified checkmark. Yes, for your emails. It's pretty cool, and I'll put that link right here you can click on. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.